Hello everyone, this is Jason for Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we're going to do something fun, and that is we're going to do a showdown. African cichlids versus American cichlids. Now, I would love to hear from you in the comments section below. Which group of fish would you choose and why? Is there a particular fish that you absolutely love? Leave that species down in the comments section below. I think that'd be really cool. Now, I know when we're looking at fish that have this many inhabitants in Africa or in the Americas, it's so hard to make generalizations, and so we're trying to do the best we can, understanding there's going to be exceptions to all of the things that we talk about. Now, a lot of the footage that I've shown you in this video, it's actually not my fish. I have been very fortunate to do a lot of fish room tours and tour a lot of different fish stores, and so I've tried to bring you some really cool representations of both the American cichlids and the African cichlids. I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. So when it comes to comparing these two different types of cichlids and where they're from, with the African cichlids, what we're going to be focusing on are the African cichlids from the three main lakes. That's Lake Malawi, Lake Tanganyika, and Lake Victoria, as well as some of the river systems, because there's some pretty cool African cichlids from those regions as well. And when it comes to the South and Central American cichlids, we're pretty much talking about everything through South and Central America and all the river systems and lakes in which you find those cichlids. So one of the reasons why people love cichlids so much is because of their color, and the African cichlids have a lot of great color, and they're very strong in this respect. And when you look at them, you look at some of the peacocks, they've got such nice deep blues and purple and red and orange and yellow, and their colors really shine. In fact, if you look at the Mbuna tank, our 75-gallon Mbuna tank, it really is awesome. It stands out from across the room with the nice rich deep colors, and the males and females both have a really cool color pattern. Sometimes they might be different, but it's certainly something that most people can appreciate and might rival some saltwater fish. So with the African cichlids, I think their strength when it comes to colors is the nice vibrant colors, the rich blues and the reds and the yellows, and so many different examples from all three lakes, whether it's Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, or Lake Victoria. Now, when it comes to the South and Central American cichlids, their color patterns are also really cool, but often they take on a different dynamic. And so I think one of the coolest cichlids to represent this are the Geophagus. We love Geophagus in our fish room, and one of the reasons for that is all that really cool spangling that you see, whether we're talking about Geophagus altifrons or Geophagus brasiliensis. And one of my favorite fish that I have is this Geophagus altifrons in this 150, and I think it's for a really obvious reason. The colors are just amazing. The trailers on their fins are fantastic. And it's not just the Geophagus that have this spangling. You could look at things like Texas cichlids and Jack Dempsey's, and they just have these really awesome colors. They're different from the African cichlids, but they would certainly rival them. Now, not all of them have the spangling. You know, if you look at something like maybe an Apistogramma, where they have the really cool colors in the fins, and the bodies are also pretty cool looking as well. Perhaps one of my favorite fish that represent this the best is this Argentea. This is an absolutely awesome fish that was brought into the GCCA Bull Show not very long ago, and it is absolutely a showstopper. Just a really good representation of how cool the colors can look on a South or Central American fish. Now let's talk a little bit about personality. After all, one of the reasons why people keep cichlids is they are some of the most personable fish on the face of the earth, and scientists are still trying to figure out why that is. Why is it that when you look at a standard tropical fish, like maybe some types of tetras or barbs, those are really awesome, but they don't have the personality. They don't seem to recognize when someone is in the room and have that same interaction as a cichlid. So both of them have really great personalities. When it comes to the African cichlids, I think what makes them cool is not just the way they interact with the person, but probably the way they interact with one another. So from a personality perspective, I actually think the African cichlids are a little bit stronger in that area, interacting with one another. I think where the real fun comes in is when you have certain South and Central American fish that are absolutely unrivaled in terms of their interactions with their owners. So I'm thinking about things like our Oscar Chaz. There's a reason why I named some of our South and Central American fish, just because they have such a cool personality, and our Oscar is very, very interactive. as was when we had our male Midas cichlid, Roger. He was like a little puppy. It almost seems like some of these Central and South American cichlids are like 2 mutations away from being able to talk to their owner, but just such great personality. You know, I'm thinking about things like maybe the larger dovi that just come right up to the tank. They recognize their owner. They're excited to see you. Their little tails are wagging in the water, and personality is definitely awesome. I don't necessarily think the South and Central American personalities are as good, at least in terms of the community dynamic in the tank, at least not compared to Africans, but definitely really cool when you're talking about how they interact with their owner. All right, let's talk about how easy they are to actually keep. And again, I know we're dealing with massive numbers of fish when we're talking about African cichlids or South and Central American cichlids, and we're trying to boil this down into a short video, and there have been thousands upon thousands of hours of video produced just profiling some of these species. So we're going to try to make some generalizations that are kind of hard to do. But when it comes to ease of keeping, I think the first thing is let's talk about aggression a little bit. So in my opinion, the African cichlids, there's a smaller range when it comes to aggression. Yes, they can be aggressive. If we're looking at a scale of 1 to 10, maybe they're somewhere between a 5 and a 7.5. So they're aggressive. If your typical community fish is like a 1 or a 2, they might get up there into that 4, let's say 4 to 7 range. And what I mean by that is, yes, they are aggressive. No, they are not good community fish. I would think for the most part, African cichlids, if they're going to be kept, should be kept in tanks that contain other African cichlids, not general community fish. But I think it's also very possible to manage the aggression, as we've done in the Mbuna tank, as we've done in some of our peacock tanks. It's possible to learn how to manage that aggression and manage it well. Now, when it comes to the South and Central American cichlids, the aggression levels are all over the place. So again, we have a very large group of fish, and so maybe we're talking about something like a pistos or rams, where the aggression levels might be as low as like a 2 or 3 on a 1 to 10 scale, where they can absolutely fit into a community tank. And then we're looking at things like dovi and flower horns and Midas cichlids, some of these big tank busting fish, where they might be the only fish that you can keep in that tank. Just one of them, and that's the only thing you're keeping in a 75 gallon, or it's the only thing you're keeping in a 125, or in the case of a dovi, you might be looking at that one fish in a 300 gallon tank. For the African cichlids, I don't see that problem being as big, right? I don't see a situation where we have to keep an African cichlid as a single fish for the most part, for the commonly kept African cichlids. Yes, there are always exceptions, but for those South and Central Americans, you could be anywhere from, angelfish would be another one. You can keep those in a community tank sometimes, but you can really have some tank busters. So they're all over the place when it comes to their aggression levels, and you really have to do your research when you're thinking about putting them into a larger community. I think if we're comparing the two in regard to water parameters, and when we're talking about ease of keeping them, I would say the African cichlids, they do really well as long as you're giving them approximately what they want. So most of them, especially from the Great Lakes, they're going to want that higher pH. They're going to want the harder water. Now again, the West Africans, maybe not. In fact, they might want some more acidic waters and softer waters, but for the most popular African cichlids, if you get them above neutral with relatively hard water, they're going to do okay. I actually think a lot of the South and Central Americans are a little bit easier to keep in terms of water parameters. All of ours, from our Apistos through our Midas cichlids and our Oscars, they're all at a pH of 8.2 and a water hardness of 180 to 200 parts per million carbonate and general hardness, and they are doing wonderfully. A lot of them breed in that water. They're showing great color, great length of life. They're eating well. So in that respect, I think a lot of the South and Central Americans can do a little bit better in varying water parameters, where the African cichlids, they will do okay. They're very hardy fish, but maybe if we're dipping below neutral, that might not be ideal for them, and you might start to see some length of life issues. Well, what about tank size? With the African cichlids, I would say for the most part, you're looking at a tank, if you've got shell dwellers, you might be able to go as low as a 20 gallon. Even the larger ones, like a lot of the peacocks and haps, you might be looking at a 75 gallon, maybe a 125, but you're in, I would say, the reasonable range. Now the South and Central Americans, they're all over the place as well. You could certainly breed a pair of rams in a 10 gallon. Most of the smaller epistos, the rams, they'll do just fine in a 20 gallon, but then you get to the big tank busters. Again, I'm thinking like dovi and some of these larger fish that might need hundreds of gallons, or maybe once again, you're dealing with a flower horn, which I know is a hybrid, or a Midas cichlid or red devils that might need a 125 or maybe a 75. You can get away with that sometimes. But in terms of tank size, it really does depend on the fish that you're keeping. Now, I've mentioned this already, but could you keep them in a community tank with the African cichlids? I would say no. I think the only appropriate way to keep African cichlids is, for the most part, keeping them in an African cichlid tank only, with the exception of maybe some of the West Africans like Crebensis, like maybe the Dicrosis. Those might be able to fit into a community tank if it's properly stocked. With the South and Central Americans, you could potentially have some cichlids that go well in a community tank. So again, I'm thinking about the rams, I'm thinking about the epistos and the angelfish. The larger, more aggressive types of fish like Jack Dempsey's or Texas cichlids or red terrors, those are fish that you're probably going to want to keep in a South American or Central American community tank, very large and overstocked, or possibly on their own. So there's going to be more problems with some of the more aggressive ones. Even Geophagus will sometimes fit into that semi-community realm and can look really great. Finally, when it comes to feeding these fish, I would say that the African cichlids might be a little bit more finicky, not drastically so, but when it comes to the African cichlids, you do have some fish. I'm thinking about Tropheus, I'm thinking about the Mbuna, where a higher vegetable diet would be very beneficial for them, and if you start giving them too much protein too fast, they can have digestive issues from time to time, where it seems like the South and Central American cichlids, for the most part, they're going to be a little bit more tolerant in what you're feeding them. Their diet is a little bit more varied, and you're probably going to have less issues when it comes time to feed them. So what is my favorite, you ask? Well, that is not an easy question to answer, and I would answer it this way. My favorite fish in my fish room is my Geophagus altiforans in the 150. I love that fish. One of the coolest fish I've seen, again, is that Argentea that my buddy Tim brought into the GCCA Bull Show. That's one of my all-time favorites. However, if I think about my favorite tanks, I think two of my favorite tanks in the fish room are my Neolamprologus multifasciatus 50-gallon lowboy, and I also really love my 75-gallon Mbuna tank, and both of those two tanks are African cichlid tanks. So I don't think I can really make a decision on which one I think is best, but again, I want to hear from you in the comments section below. What is your favorite type of fish? Is it African cichlids? Is it American cichlids? And it would be really cool if you left down in the comments section below which fish is your favorite. If you pick Africans, why? What is the best African cichlid you've ever seen? What is the best South or Central American cichlid you've ever seen? I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, let's just have fun with it. It's a cool topic. We'll see you in the next one.